All right, let's get going. I'm Matt. Hope you can see me on the video. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm speaking to you from Shoreditch in London today from my apartment. And I want to let you know that if I can make the slides work, that fairly obviously I work for Algolia and we work very closely with commercetools, which is why I'm speaking to you here today about it. I'm a field engineer, so connecting use cases in the field with our own product, making sure they're working as well as they can. And the scope of what we're going to talk about today is what I perceive to be one of the easiest ways to get a commercetools implementation up and running and connect it to Algolia. Following that, connect Algolia to a Vue.js store, and we'll use the commercetools demo store to be able to get search up and running in a few minutes. And for that, we'll use instant search. Thank you for replying to the poll, by the way. I'm going to close that for myself. Indeed, I have used commercetools before. In fact, I used to work at a commerce API called Molten, which was acquired by Elastic Path in the end. But all along the way, we're big admirers of commercetools as a headless leader in the space. And here I am at another headless leader in the space, Algolia. So feel free to ask any questions you have in the Q&A box down below. I suppose it's very important, given the time that we have, to choose the way in which we go about this. So we're going to have 3 items on the agenda, and we'll move through them relatively quickly. We'll give you some background, part of which I've just done. The first thing we need to do is get our data into commercetools, into Algolia, and make sure those two systems can talk easily to each other. Thirdly, we're going to check the Vue.js store and implement instant search to replace their own standard search component with Algolia's. Since we only have a limited time together, and since, I can't be relied on to write perfect code first time, I'm going to be showing you and walking you through some pre-written code, because that's more helpful than actually sitting there watching me type and potentially fix bugs along the way. And then lastly, I want to mention that for the scope of this webinar, we're not about writing perfect production-ready code. We're about getting things going in less than half an hour or so. So with that said, I'm going to turn off my camera so we have full focus, and we'll get going. I'm going to stop sharing the current screen, and I'm just going to make sure you can see my full desktop, so that when I switch to our code editor, that's something that you should be able to see easily. Let me know at any stage if you can't see the screen. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and as well as the code editor, what I'm going to have us use is actually a Google Doc. So we're going to get up and running by a Google Doc. We're going to write out our architecture and our aims very simply. Number 1, commercetools. An account, data, we're good. Algolia, same as above. What we're going to do at this stage is we're going to need a method of connecting the two. So let's cover step 1 and 2, and once we have it done, let's focus on connecting the two. So with commercetools, you can sign up for, I think it's a 60-day trial these days to get a demo store. And once you get a store, you'll be put into your dashboard. And here we see my dashboard with some products in it. Here are the main products overall. You start with no products, but luckily they provide you with a repository. I'll show you it. Let's see. It is the commercetools Sunrise data repository. And they provide this to you for free. It's the default data set for their demo store. So you can use this to get up and running in a couple of minutes. And we'll see, based on the README, that once you have your project, you can provide your env, and you can run npm run import data. And that's precisely what I've done here. I've saved the time by watching you having it run. We just have our default data set, we run it, and the result is this. So we have data in commercetools to work with. Demo environment, easy. This looks good. For Algolia, we can do something very similar. So before we get things synchronizing, we'll want to do one big dump to get everything into Algolia. Because we're working with one default data set, that data set is actually available in CSV also for Sunrise. And so all I've had to do is create an index. So I've called it products, add my records, and I've uploaded a CSV file. So we don't care too much about the structure of the data at this stage. I'm just going to delete this sample record. So we could massage the data however we wanted, do some pre-processing on it. But for now, all we care about is that we have the same data in each system. Number one, number two, good to go. Connecting the two. This is what we really care about. The way in which commercetools allows you to subscribe to changes in their system is by using something they call a subscription. So if we go to settings, I believe it might be developer settings. There we go. So we have quite a few different API clients here. So what I'm going to do is bring up the documentation. Like this. And the way in which commercetools works, like I said, is that whenever you need to know that a change has been made, you can create a subscription to be notified of a message or change. They don't implement the message queue for you, which leaves it to you to decide how you want to implement that yourself. And they give you various options, such as Azure, AWS. In fact, here they are. Google Cloud, and so on. Hope you can see that okay. This is really important because when we design the connection between the two, we don't want Algolia asking when anything's changed. What we want from a commerce system or from a CMS system, if it's working well, is to tell us when something changes. So we know we're going to implement a subscription like this. Based on that subscription, we need a message queue like that. And based on that message queue, we need to implement something that will update Algolia accordingly, like this. If we have those three steps, then we will have the ability to pipe changes from commercetools into Algolia. Since Algolia updates super quickly, I have to say it's one of the things I'm really proud of about the product. We don't need to worry too much about the latency. What we might need to worry about, though, is the latency on the subscription and the message queue, right? If you're publishing a new product from commercetools, that could trigger, for example, a rebuild of your site or it being available via the API. And therefore, you could have it live on your site. But if Algolia is powering the search, you might not have that available through the search yet. So we'll want to be a little bit careful. But for a naive implementation, this is a good way to test things out. And it is at this stage that I began implementing these things manually. So if we bring up Postman, give it a second. First thing I was able to do is through the commercetools docs, let's get all of our subscriptions here. Might need to generate a new bearer token. Yes, we do. I'll do that in a minute. So what we're able to do is get our subscriptions via a commercetools endpoint, and then we can actually create one. So we can do that through here and give it a body. Once we create that subscription, it needs to be subscribed to a message queue. And in fact, when you're creating the subscription, it actually needs to know what message queue it's sending to in order to create the subscription. So that's the step that we needed to do first. So the most naive implementation would be to grab the API docs, go to Postman, create the subscription, and then pass it back. In order to have the subscription, you need the message queue. And then you need your thing to update Algolia. So in order to get the message queue up and running, I chose Amazon SNS. Just a simple message queue, which allows you to pipe stuff and then subscribe that to things like Aws Lambda to do this part. So that's what I started off with, and I'm not going to show you because I moved on. But if you wanted to start with that, you could. Create via Postman, create an SNS queue manually on AWS, which you can do no problem, and then create a Lambda to update Algolia. Now, if you wanted to do this, recommend using serverless, because that is something that allows you to very easily spin up Lambdas, serverless apps, and deploy them easily. You can do it for AWS, you can do it for Google Cloud. It's agnostic in that way. So you'd use the serverless framework there. However, having done all that, there were quite a few variables and quite a few configurations that had to be carried across and connected up in order to connect these dots. And you could see you're using 3 separate applications, right? So you have AWS, you have serverless, and then you have commercetools. That's not a reliable way to configure your infrastructure, manually doing all that, even though you'd only do it once. So what we'll do is iterate further on that. And now I'm going to show you some code. We're going to introduce at this point Terraform. Terraform is a wonderful tool if you haven't heard of it. It's a way of provisioning infrastructure as code, essentially. Now, you've realized we're using Lambda and SNS as a message queue. Both of those are AWS products. For that reason, we could have used CloudFormation, which I believe is AWS, their product for doing infrastructure as code. But that locks us into AWS. So by using Terraform, something a little bit more agnostic, we give us the ability to switch out where our message queue and where our Lambda is coming from for that product for serverless. So this is something that's very powerful and we'll want to keep as a tenant in our architecture, being able to switch components in and out. The same goes for Algolia and commercetools. Because we're headless, you are able to change your APIs. You have a high level of flexibility. That's important to keep that in every aspect of the architecture. And so let's implement it. Let's get rid of the README there. And let's go to not commercetools sunrise data, but Terraform Lambda SNS. All right. Here we have main.tf, tf being a Terraform file. And so I'm going to actually put this into presentation mode so we can see a little bit better what's going on. I'll walk through each bit step by step because it's quite important and provide you the GitHub afterwards if you'd like. What we're doing first here is declaring our provider, which in this case is AWS, and we're providing the region that we want to deploy this infrastructure to. You can see already that we have a high level of flexibility by being able to declare multiple providers. Easy. The first thing we're going to care about is setting up a number of things to do with AWS. We're going to care about the commercetools subscription last because we know that we need everything set up in AWS to give it the message queue when creating the subscription for commercetools. Here's the first thing that we're going to do. When you create a Lambda function, it gets uploaded as a zip file, unless you want to do it kind of inline in the console. But for our purposes, we'll upload a zip file. And so what's actually happening here is that in this directory, if you look up top here, I have commercetools Lambda. And that's actually a Lambda function, a general template for a Lambda function. And so what we want to do is zip that up and deploy it to AWS. And the first part of that is going to be done by this code here. It's going to take our source directory, it's going to zip it up, and we provide an output path. The really neat thing about this is that it can then provide that output path, that proper file name as a variable to you, as well as the hash of that file. And we'll see why that's important in a minute. So this part is going to zip up our Lambda and make it available to us later on. Moving on, what we're now doing is declaring a resource. So you see the three types here. We have a provider, a data type, and a resource type. What this is actually going to do is that it's giving us the ability to create an AWS SNS topic, which is what we need for our message queue. Now, I don't necessarily need to provide this. You can give it the default delivery policy, but it's essentially declaring for your messages how it's going to try and redeliver them. So I didn't want many retries here. You could configure this as you wanted. So I've added this. Once that runs, you'll have an SNS topic. So part of your message queue will be created. Next, for AWS, you need some permissions. So what we're going to start looking at here is for our Lambda, which is going to be triggered by our SNS topic, giving it a role with a policy that allows execution and logs. That's what this is doing for us here. You can find all of this stuff on the Terraform docs. It's quite easy to implement. Next, we're creating a CloudWatch log group. So CloudWatch being the log part of AWS, or the log product if you like, and giving it a retention of 14 days. Next, we're creating a policy that allows logging from a Lambda. And here I should really have restricted this to our own function only, our own log group. But here you'll see I'm just allowing it by default across the board. So it works, but it's not optimal. Next, we're doing a policy attachment to attach our new role to the new policy. So that says the role that our Lambda is inheriting will have a policy that allows it to write to logs. That's very important because we want to be able to examine our logs, right? And here we have our AWS Lambda function. This is the beauty of Terraform right here. You're able to specify for the file name the data.archive file attribute and our Lambda. You'll see back up here, data archive file, and the name is Lambda. So down here, we're very easily able to say, just use the variable of the thing you did above. Same for the role. We had the role created. We can use the ARN of that role down here. We have some things like handlers and the runtime, everything you'd expect. Then the source code hash is given to us by the data archive as well. This is something that Terraform can use to detect whether your Lambda has changed or been updated. And if it has, then it knows to re-upload that zip file and update your Lambda on AWS. And finally, we're providing some environment variables. We need some things to be running this Lambda, especially commercetools credentials, right here, here, and here, and an Algolia API key. These are provided as variables, and these variables are coming from another file. You'll see we've made it over here, variables.tf, which I'm not going to show you because it has the full declarations in there. But here we have examples of it. So it looks like this: variable, name, type, and then a value. So we're able to pull in any other, let's say, type from a .tf file in this main.tf file. Super helpful to us. And so off we go. This is going to create our Lambda. Next, we have a Lambda. We're going to create a subscription for SNS and the Lambda. So it's going to take our topic that we created earlier. It's going to add the protocol of Lambda and the endpoint from our newly created Lambda function. Next, it's going to make sure that we have permission within SNS, the message queue, to execute our Lambda function when it receives a message. Wonderful. So what we've just done here is implement our message queue, our Lambda, all of the permissions, all of the logging, and all of the variables in one piece of code. All that's left to do is work on the commercetools side. So we'll initialize our provider. And this is super cool, right? So Terraform provides infrastructure as code, but it just so happens that commercetools have created their own Terraform provider. This means that you can instantiate the provider within Terraform and make use of some of their endpoints, like creating subscriptions directly from within code. And that's precisely what we're doing here. So we're giving it an IAM user, an access key, and a policy. That's just some of the things we need to do by default to allow us to send a message to that topic. Now, I'm not fully sure. We could probably get away with not adding some of these, but I wanted to be more safe than sorry at this stage. And finally, we have our subscription. We're telling it the destination of SNS, and by this time, everything else has been created. So we can use our topic with our ARN, and then we pass in some of the permissions and tokens we've created. In this case, I've been specific just to show you what you can do. You can subscribe to changes for a resource type of product, and then also you can subscribe to, let's say, messages for product published and product created. So that's the level of specificity you can get into. Now, I'm going to give you this, give this a go to show you what's happening if you haven't used it before. So bear with me. Let's see what we can do here. So I'm going to get rid of, let's try this. No, that's not helpful at all. Let's do this. So we're in our directory. We can do Terraform Plan, and that will run through the state, check what's actually being created, and check what we need to do. Please bear with me. I've used some depreciated syntax since this is Terraform 0.12. I think I've used 0.11 syntax. But here, you can see everything that it will create. And this is wonderful because if you've done any of it already, it's going to tell you. So here we haven't done anything. We can see that we have a lot to do. Let's go back up and run one command, Terraform apply. This command is going to refresh the state again. We'll say yes, we want to continue. I'm going to do a time check for us here. Okay. Wherever you are in the world, if you're watching this video, cross your fingers. Every piece of our infrastructure has just been created. So if we ran Terraform Plan again, we should be able to see, hoopla. Like this, that we don't have anything to update. And so while it's doing that, let's pop over to AWS. Check. We have our new Lambda created 30 seconds ago. It has the correct permissions and our correct resource policy. And this is the bit that's a little bit tricky to make sure that things are working. Let's go to our product list. And what I haven't showed you, because it's quite easy to do, is within the Lambda, I've basically called Algolia when there's a message and called save objects to update the API. So if we go to test, that object I deleted earlier was the test, so it's not there anymore. Let's go unpublish to publish. Hold your breath to make sure that all of this works. Doesn't work unless you hold your breath, by the way. And give it a second, boom. So as you can see, it's not the slowest to get updated. Our latency isn't bad here. We'd have to design our queue in a way that could handle, let's say, many products being updated in a batch. but here at least we have the ability to get the message queue working. If at any stage we wanted to pull this down, Terraform destroy is going to pull everything down from commercetools, AWS, and elsewhere in one command. So that's a tool that you can use to get up and running with the data sync for commercetools, Algolia, and using Terraform. Off we go. All right. So all we need to do in the Lambda is essentially call Algolia save objects like this. And this is an indexing method, and we can give it an array of objects, or we can use add objects and provide an array of objects here. Something that hasn't been implemented is dealing with variations. So let's say you update a product in the Lambda. Do you need to go and check what variations are happening and how to deal with those? That's something that's not in scope here. But I can show you before we reach the half-hour mark that this is how you do it in commercetools. So what's happening in the Lambda is, and now this is very shoddily put together for the purposes of demonstration. So it's not perfect code, but it will work for you. What we're doing first is initializing Algolia. And then we're going to parse out our SNS message, assuming there's a record. So we could do a lot of error handling here. We can get the ID, the type, and the version, which will give us the commercetools data. So we could have version 1 of the product and so on. We could use that later. And then the type of the message. We could use that to determine whether we should update Algolia or not. And all I'm doing here is getting the ID of that commercetools product by using their SDK. So it's pretty straightforward from their documentation. They provide composable SDKs. You can create a client, build a request, and get a product. And so we then use that product to use the save objects method. I've just popped it into an array. You could do a single object, but I wanted the ability to use a batch. And so that's what that does. All right, close this up. Don't save it for now. Since we have a data pipeline running, we may as well go ahead and implement full-on search. What have we got? A few minutes left together. So let's see if we can do it in that time. We're going to move into their own standard demo store. And luckily, we don't need to write any code here. I'm going to bring it up in a separate code tab. All right. Awesome. And so this is a Vue.js store. It's given to you on GitHub. Feel free to use it at any stage. It's given to you by commercetools. And let's start it. Okie doke. Here we have the commercetools demo store. And in fact, I've already implemented Algolia. So once again, styling isn't perfect. The purpose of this is to show you what you can do quickly and then iterate on it, right? Get the skateboard going and then move on it. And so if everything works as it should, I've just done some default search in here. So we can now search something like shoes, get search as you type. I've just added the color here. If we go like this, we can click into a search result and bring it back from commercetools. But if we don't, then it's going to come from Algolia. All of this data is coming from Algolia. And so we could then filter based on this right here. So I'm going to show you how to implement this very briefly and why it's important to consider an architecture pattern. The one other thing I'd like to point out at this stage, though, is let's go back to, let's say, shoes. If I then go to sale and men, it's keeping the search term and filtering within the category. So I'll show you how that works as well. If we go back from this, we get all of the men's sale items. So easy way of implementing. And honestly, it was the way that commercetools set this demo store up that made it that easy. I'm no expert in Vue. So anyone can do this if you want to in a few minutes. One of the other reasons why that's the case is because we're using instant search here. Algolia's libraries to help you get up and running with search fast. So how do we do it, right? We have two components that really care about search. We have the search bar up here. So if we inspect that, we will see that that's a Vue component. See, we have our index there. And within our header, we have our search component, right? And so as we type, the search input is being provided there. And then somehow we need to communicate that to not this component, but an entirely different component called search product list. And so let's get started with that. What you do with instant search, let's see if we can find it in here. So go API reference, instant search JS, and actually let's choose Vue. Is that when you get up and running, you start by implementing a component called AIS instant search. So this provides most of the wrapping functionality to configure search. This is very important. Every Vue instant search widget must be wrapped under this one. So what's the implication here? Well, here you can see we instantiate it. And then within this, we need to provide our search bar component, our search results component, and our refinement components. But if you check back here, the way that it's set up is that we have one component all the way up here in the tree and another over here. And although they're kind of adjacent, they're definitely not nested under the same one. So if we wanted to put instant search in here, we'd either have to put it at the very root or do something funky. And so the way in which that you can handle this quite easily, or at least the way in which I've found, I'm sure there are other methods, maybe even better methods than this, is to decide which of these components can be the dumbest, for sake of a better word. And so we can try and only keep one instance of instant search running on the app. And then for whatever can be dumb, we cannot make it instant search, so you don't get some of the neat functionality, but it means you don't have to manage two instant search components. And for us, if we check this search component here, so let's go into components, search. This is not instant search at all. This is just my naive implementation of a search bar. And all it's doing every time anything changes is it's dispatching a few events to a global event store. That's Vuex for anyone interested. We're setting the search query, setting should show search results, and we're pushing. So if we're not on the search results page, that being on the products page, if we're on home, then we want to push to it. So this is just quite a simple implementation of an input, for want of a better word. We're calling it a search bar, right? And so that means we don't need instant search here at all, but that was simple to get up and running. We just have a template and our index.vue here for the JavaScript. Now we have our component which can actually be using instant search over here. And you'll find it in product overview, search product list. And here we have the template for that. So in our script.js, this is where we implement Algolia search and instant search. So if we check the template, we will have, so in this instance, we have our AOS instant search component up here, declared at the top. And then in our results container, we have a slot scope for our items, and for each item, we're just showing each result. And here we have an AIS refinement list, which allows you to show facets. So you could just copy paste this, choose a different attribute like style, and you would get a new menu like this on the side for whatever attribute it is. So now we have one instant search implementation up here and a single search bar up there. The only other thing that we need to do, see over here, is that when we have root parameters, we're being passed the category slug. And so we do some, should we say, cleansing on it. And this provides us with the current root params for filtering. And we can then use that to filter on our search. It's a very naive implementation, but gets you up and running in a few minutes. And here, this is the really neat thing about it, is that we can use something called AIS configure. So that's part of instant search, but it lets you configure precisely how the search occurs. And so you can pass it any number of search parameters to provide raw search parameters to the API without rendering anything. I find this super useful because look what we can do here. We can pass it a VIF and we can say that if we have a root parameter, then let's configure the search parameters to be the query and filters for the current root parameters. If we have no root parameters, let's just send the query. So once again, multiple ways of doing this. This was just the one that I chose. But by using these configure widgets, it gets you up and running super quickly. And so that's tied everything together. And every time we update our commercetools data set, it'll get piped to Algolia, which will automatically update the search results. Now, one last thing to mention is that the search results are sitting here coming from Algolia. But as soon as you hit this, it's coming from commercetools. And so that's important because do you want to index all of your variations or not, for example? Right, here you have some variations coming from commercetools. It's obviously important on the product detail page. Now you can index all of your variants into Algolia if you'd like. And we provide a feature called distinct to help handle that on the front end. It doesn't mean you have to do that either. So the pattern that I'd like you to think about, which you already do, I'm sure, is just what user experience would you like from search? And so if you'd like facets for size or color in this instance, for a single type of shoe, then maybe you need to index your variations. If you just want to show, let's say, color, as we did on our search, then you just need to index the variations of color, each type of color for each type of product. So you can kind of blend the line here. You may not have to index all of your variations, and it's something we can definitely help you with. But I've talked for almost 40 minutes now, and I hope you're still bearing with me. I really appreciate it. So far, we've covered data synchronization, getting a front end up and running in Vue, making sure that we only use one instant search, say, component. Although we could have used two and managed our state equally, it was just simpler to get it up this way for myself. And we know that we can use Terraform to manage our entire infrastructure base. And we know that we keep Algolia as simple as possible. You update commercetools updates Algolia, which updates the search results. And we know that at some point in future, depending on how you update your products, whether they be batches or just once for, let's say, different products at different times, you may need to revisit the architecture of your message queue in this instance to handle that at scale. But I am going to stop the share and say thank you. Thank you very much. If there are any Q&As or anything else, happy to answer them. So I'm going to take a few now, and then if you have any afterwards, you can reach me on Twitter at Matthew Foyle, or email matthew.foyle@algolia.com. In case you suggest to load from the commercetools APIs, how would you do the price filtering and sorting, considering price to exclude or include taxation, which is different for products? This is a really important question because it's your delineation between the search service and the commerce service, right? And imagine you have a product configurator as an extreme example. How do you handle the search experience for very configurable products versus how do you handle the commerce engine, which actually helps generate them? And so the answer is it depends, basically. Depends on your user interactions and the design you want to be showing people. Do the design first, design your experiences first, and then design the implementation around that, because there will be multiple ways to cut that particular piece of wood. It's something that we're happy to help with. We come across it all the time, but it's UX dependent, right? And lastly, how would you show the price in the results grid given the powerful pricing model commercetools provides? Very good point. So in the results grid, we're just doing the default price.en essentially, but it depends on how much of the commercetools data you index. So in this instance, we actually got the full product when we got the message into our Lambda because it didn't include it by default. It just includes a representation of the product. Now, since we're calling the API anyway, we can get back a full pricing response and index that into Algolia. So it's up to you in what way you'd like to index your data, because Algolia is not strict that way. Unstructured JSON will do you the world of good. So it's a choice in that case. And that's what these tools aim to provide, right? Is some choice, but not give you a massive amount of tech debt once you start making those choices. Keep some doors open for you. So thank you, Halil, and thank you, everyone. I'm going to mark those questions as done. And for now, I'm going to say goodbye, give you back a bit of your day. And yeah, reach me on Twitter on anything else if you like. We have another live coding session coming up, I think June 30th, on building a live catalog browser. And so I'll leave you with that note because that'll be super cool. I'm just going to reshare the screen. There we go, June 30th. And I think you'll get an email about that because that's more UX based. It's going to be super interesting. So I'll pop it up there for you. But folks, thank you kindly. Talk to you again soon.